So after 10 long years of being on the same treatment for my Crohn's disease, I am switching therapies. So let's talk about it. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today, like I said, I want to talk about switching therapies from the one that I've been on for the last 10 years to treat my Crohn's, why I'm switching, and what I'm switching to, and what's next, and everything in between. So again, let's get into the discussion. So for the last 10 years, I have been on Humira or Humira biosimilar to treat my Crohn's disease, and it's worked really well. When in 2015, when I went on Humira, I was in a pretty bad spot. I hadn't been on treatment for a few months because I was switching between GI doctors and I needed something, and I had responded well to like anti-TNF therapies prior to this. And so my new GI thought that Humira would be a really good option for me, self-injection at home, and it's an anti-TNF, and people usually have good results going from like a Remicade like me to an anti-TNF. So we had made the decision to go on Humira, and it was one of the best decisions we made at the time because it worked really well for me. It took a few months to kind of get used to the self-injection process of Humira, and then it took probably, I don't know, 5 to 6 months for me to really start noticing kind of a difference in how I was feeling. And I eventually got into remission and deep remission and remained stable on Humira for 10 years. And that's a really long time for a treatment. I mean, I think if anybody knows, being on the same treatment for inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's disease for an extended period of time like that is a big win. There are things that happen, like your body stops responding to the medication, you can build up antibodies to the medication. And so being able to be on a therapy for that long, for a decade, is a huge win. And for it to work that well for that long is also a huge win. And I had no issues with Humira. Like, I didn't have any side effects really. Like, initially I had some headaches and I had some upper respiratory infections as my body kind of adjusted to being, immunocompromised. But other than that, like, it really wasn't that big of a deal. Once my body adjusted to it, I did really well. My scopes became clean and really good looking. My lab work was good. I didn't need any kind of additional, medication to help. Humira was doing its job like it was supposed to, and my body was responding really well. And so I became stable, and I didn't have to do much. I did my injections twice a month, and I saw my GI doctor a couple times a year, got my scopes when I needed to, and that was it. And for the last 10 years, it's put me in such a good place with my Crohn's disease that I didn't really have to worry much about it. And that's a really good feeling as well, living with this disease and having times where all I did was worry about being sick, and all I did was worry about whether or not a treatment was going to work, or if I was going to be in the hospital, or did I need surgery. I mean, it's a really good feeling to get to a place where you're doing so well on a therapy. So when you have to come off of a therapy like that's been really good for you, there's a lot of feelings that come with it. There's a lot of emotions that come with it. And I've been experiencing that over the last, week or so since the decision was made to switch therapies. So why am I switching? Why at this point am I having to come off of Humira and kind of the biosimilars to that and go to a completely new therapy? So as you've seen in some of my other videos, I've been on 2 biosimilars to Humira. So I was originally on this, which is Hadlima, a biosimilar to Humira. This was the first biosimilar that I started on back in 2023. And then earlier this year, I switched to Cyltezo because of insurance changes and stuff like that. This is another Humira biosimilar as well. And so what I want to say to preface this is that this is not completely a biosimilar issue. I'm a huge fan of biosimilars. I think they're great. They're cost effective. They open up a lot of treatment options for people who've never been on a biologic and sometimes can't afford it. And so they're really great. But back in 2023, at the end of 2023, due to biosimilars being implemented for Humira for my insurance company, they wanted me to switch. And so I did. I switched to Hadlima at the end of 2023. And I did it for, 5 months-ish. And I did fine. There was no issues with it. It was such a smooth transition. The injection was similar, didn't hurt. Same, one injection every other week. No issue with it. I honestly couldn't even tell that I had switched, other than the fact that it looks different than the Humira pen, and it injects a little different. It really wasn't an issue. But then I switched insurances because I got a new job. And in January of 2024, when my new insurance went into effect, they had not implemented biosimilars yet. So biosimilars were still kind of new in the US. Middle of 2023 was when they really became on the market, and there was a bunch of Humira biosimilars that came out. And not every insurance had implemented them immediately. And so when I switched insurances, they had not implemented them yet for 2024. So I went from Hadlima back to Humira. And that was fine. I didn't care as long as I got my drug. And I didn't have any issues either. Going from Humira to Hadlima back to Humira, I didn't notice any kind of issues. It really wasn't a big deal either. It was just kind of going back to something that I was familiar with. And so I did that for all of 2024. So stayed on Humira all of 2024. Well, this year in 2025, my insurance then, who had not implemented biosimilars, decided to implement them for this year, which I had expected. I knew that was probably coming. And so they had implemented biosimilars for 2025, which meant I would go off of Humira again and onto a biosimilar, but it was not to Hadlima, it was to Cyltezo. And for whatever reason, they don't do Hadlima. They did two or three other biosimilars to Humira. Cyltezo is one of them. It's considered interchangeable. I've talked about this before, which means that you should just be able to switch back and forth without having any issues. So I started that in January, and for some reason, I noticed over the last few months that something fell off. And so I noticed initially some changes in my bowel movements, so some irregulation in that. And then over the last month or so, I noticed a lot more nausea, like way more nausea. I was having to take a lot more nausea medicine. I was having a little bit of abdominal pain, and then dealt with still some of the irregularity, from constipation to like diarrhea, to thinking I may have had like a bowel blockage. And I could tell that I just knew something was wrong. And the only thing that we can attribute it to is the switches back and forth between Humira and a biosimilar, back to Humira and back to another biosimilar. And so knowing that I had made a switch to Cyltezo over the last few months, and that really coincided with when my symptoms start, it seemed as if that was kind of the issue. And there is data on the switching from back and forth to back and forth between biosimilars and the reference product, that the efficacy can wane. But so I just tried to kind of deal with it and see if maybe some of it would subside. And unfortunately it didn't. And so I continued to do my injections and just trying to see again if anything would get better, and with it not. And so I was due for a checkup with my GI anyways, which I had a little over a week and a half ago now. And so she asked how I was doing, and I told her the truth. I said, I've been experiencing some more symptoms. I don't think that I'm in a full-blown flare. I don't think that I'm to that point yet. But over the last few months, I told her that, I've experienced the irregularity from constipation to diarrhea. I've had the very severe nausea, a little bit of abdominal pain, and I think that it's potentially the biosimilar. And, and she agreed. She did point out that there is the data out there that does show that when you switch from the reference product to biosimilar, back to reference product to another biosimilar, that the efficacy does wane. And so that's what I'm experiencing. So after a discussion about it, she asked, she said that, we could change therapies if I wanted. And that was kind of her suggestion. And we discussed it, and I said, yes, I think that I'm just ready to change, because I don't want to get to a point where I do get to a full-blown flare, especially if, and I don't also want to settle for not being a flare, but being symptomatic. So I've lost kind of that clinical remission, but not the overall deep remission. I don't want to settle for just being okay because I'm familiar with the treatment. I don't want to settle for being symptomatic, but having my disease somewhat in check. And so we decided to switch. And initially, we were going to switch me to a medicine called Rinvoq, which is a pill. It's still a biologic, but it's a pill, so that's different. We talked about some of the potential side effects of it, and I was okay with some of it. But after thinking about it, there were some side effects that I wasn't really I didn't really want a chance because I had dealt with some stuff a couple of years ago with some side effects from medication, some just a lot of issues, and I'm prone to having a lot of side effects. So if that is a thing, I typically will get all of the side effects. And so after talking about that, we made a decision to go to a drug called Tremfya, which you may or may not have heard of. It's newer for IBD. It was approved for UC, so the last year, and I believe approved for Crohn's disease around February of this year. It has some really incredible data. It's, you can either get a loading dose via infusion and switch to injections, or you can do the subcutaneous injection loading dose and continue those once a month. So I made a decision to just do the infusion loading dose and then go to the injections. I inject another drug anyways, and I'm like, just give me a break from injecting for a little bit for initial, because I still inject my other rare disease medication. Like, just give me a break. I don't want to have to do a bunch of loading dose injections. Let's just do the IV injection and go from there. But it was still a tough decision. Again, I've been on Humira and the biosimilar for 10 years now. It's been a medication that's been incredible for me, and to lose that, something that's been a staple in my treatment for the last 10 years, is hard. There's this kind of emotional thing of switching. Like, what if I switch to new treatment and it doesn't work as well? What if I have to now go through multiple treatments to figure out what works? I respond really well to medication. Thankfully, I feel lucky because of that, because I do respond well to medication. So I'm not too concerned that I won't respond well, but there is that thought in the back of my mind that, like, hey, what if I don't? And now I'm kind of going through this kind of treatment gauntlet of figuring out what works, what doesn't again. And to not be on kind of the stable aspect of that. So I recently did my last biosimilar / Humira injection. My Tremfya has not been approved yet, but we're gonna stop my Cyltezo so that I don't have to wait when it does get approved to kind of get some of the medication out of my system. So I'm technically done, unless something comes up with my prior authorization and things like that. I may do one more injection, but as of now, I am done. So for the last 10 years, this part of my life, this Humira, is done, and that's a lot for me. Again, it's a staple in my life and something that's done so well for me and put me in remission, and to a point where I don't always have to think about my Crohn's disease. Yes, there are things, I still deal with some nausea here and there, or, a couple of years ago, I did have a flare, and that I had to go to the hospital for. And so, there have been bumps in the road, but overall, those bumps have been very minimal, and I'm wildly grateful for that. And so I'm hopeful, though. I'm hopeful that this new treatment works well. It has some amazing data out there for this drug, and I think that I'm going to do well. I really do. I think that it'll be an easy transition. I'll get 3 loading doses over the course of about, I think, 6 to 8 weeks, and then I'll move to once a month subcutaneous injections, and we'll go from there. But these decisions are not made lightly. They are very challenging and come with a lot of emotions. And I think that's important to point out and to talk about, the emotional journey of deciding on a treatment and going off of a treatment that you're stable on, or making any kind of change to your treatment plan. It's a lot on us as patients, especially, again, being on a medication for so long that's worked so well, and then having to stop it, or even having to go to biosimilars. I mean, that's a lot of stress on patients, because you're on something that works so well. You're on the reference product. You've been on it for a really long time, and then they're like, well, we want to switch you to something that's basically the same, a little bit different. The data says it should work the same, but there's so many things. You get to a good spot in your treatment journey that you don't want to make any changes, because you don't want to risk going back to that place where you're very sick, very ill, and have to just go through all of this again. You don't want to do it. And so it's just the treatment journey of this, figuring out treatments, changing treatments. It's just very stressful and emotional and mentally draining. And so when I left my appointment, I mean, I just kind of sat in my car for a second and was like, okay, this is it. The last 10 years, this what I call storyline of my Crohn's disease treatment is ending, and we're beginning a new chapter. And so I'm excited for it. Again, Tremfya is also not an anti-TNF. It's an IL-23 medication, so it's a different mechanism of action in the way that it works. And so that's a little different as well. And the biologics that I've only been on have always been anti-TNF, so this is also a change in that way. But again, really good data, really exciting stuff. So I'm excited to take y'all on this journey with me of going from something that I've been on for 10 years to a brand new treatment. And, the prior authorization process will be something that I talk about. Hopefully I don't have any issues because I do meet all the criteria. I've been on multiple anti-TNF meds. I've been on biosimilars. I've been on some azathioprine at one point. And so I technically meet all the criteria to at least be on it, but we all know how prior authorizations can go. And so I will talk about that as well. Hopefully it's a breeze in the next 2 weeks that I start my medication. But I will take you on this journey. But I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to point out again that I did really well on my first biosimilar. I had no issues. And again, there's data to support that as well, that typically patients who go from the reference product to the biosimilar don't have any issues. It's just really when you have to start kind of switching back and forth like I did that you start losing that efficacy of the drug. And so that's what seems to have gotten me, is the switches. And it's unfortunate and I hate it, but it's the world we live in right now. And I hope that there's some changes to the way biosimilars are implemented and the way that they're forcing patients to change. I'm not a fan of force switching at all. And I hope that there at some point is some change in that regard. But with that said, we will say goodbye to Humira, Hadlima, Cyltezo, the biosimilars. They've been incredible for me over the last 10 years. I'm very grateful, very thankful, very fortunate to have been on something that's worked so well. And, I'm sad to get off of it, of something that I'm just so familiar with, and go to something new, but excited for the potential relief that I'm going to get, and hopefully the long-term treatment and deep remission and all of those things. And knowing that there are so many treatment options out there too, that if for some reason this doesn't work, I've got a bunch of other options that I can go to now. And that's great, because when I first started Humira, there still were not that many options out there, but now there's so many. And so I'm grateful for that as well. But thank you all for watching. If you have any questions about Humira, the biosimilars, or Tremfya, let me know. I will take you along the process of getting on Tremfya, the infusions, how all that works, the prior authorization aspect of it. I will definitely keep that coming as soon as I get there. But if you, again, any questions about self-injecting, Humira, biosimilars, let me know. I'm happy to discuss it. But thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe. Keep up with me. I love to hear your comments, your stories, everything that you're going through, especially biosimilars are a huge topic right now as well. So I know there's a lot of stress and anxiety out there. So let me know about that as well if you have questions. But thank you for watching. Thank you for coming along this journey for me, and keep watching out for some more information about Tremfya and that process for me and what's next. But thank you all. Look out for the next video, and I really appreciate all the love and support that you send me all the time. So thank you. I'll see you next time.